Somehow, Palpatine returned. It's crazy, I know, but he's back. And by he, I mean me. I'm back. I'm Palpatine in this instance. Except I'm not actually a old man hermit who may or may not be taking various inspirations from the most insane young Hegelians in the world. A lot of interesting stuff has happened since last stream. Indeed, and I intend to talk about it. So, we're going to go back into Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. It has been 22 days since the last follow that I got, but I didn't get to shout it out, so I will do so here. Sparkling Image Car Wash. I saw them in chat last stream. I actually did not have any really good idea of how long it was going to be between streams. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate all of the support and care that people are showing. Like how MatPat thought his plan would work. Yeah, honestly, I could start with that since my thoughts are somewhat short form. You know, I have some things to say about it. I think that MatPat is pretty cool. However, I do think that, like, it's kind of silly to think that that would work, at least off rip. It's possible that he learns that politics is full of failures, false starts, and so on, and keeps going at it. I don't remember what exactly his project was supposed to be about, other than, like, I don't know, advocating for, like, content creator interests, which honestly, not a bad idea, considering that, like, you have the ruling, owning class of content creators who are currently running the government, right? Like, all of the people in government are grifters or wannabe grifters or whatever. Yeah, and then you have creators like MatPat who are trying to make an honest living and have to navigate the nightmare that is the modern internet. I think the best version of the project that MatPat could be engaging in is essentially trying to bring the kind of online literacy to government that it would require if you were to be a content creator on YouTube, the likes of which MatPat is, you know? Because so many of, you know, the Congress people and their staff are not very internet literate, you know? We've all heard the way that Congress talks about the internet. Republicans don't like that for obvious reasons. Yeah. We've all heard the way that Congress and people in government have talked about the internet, both in the United States and to a lesser degree elsewhere. So the state of legal protections and regulations for basically your average person online have definitively lagged behind nominal protections elsewhere in society to such an extent that it actually has a defining characteristic with modern anti-democratic backsliding. A lot of the anti-democratic backsliding that we are witnessing right now is taking place on the internet and started with the mass-scale erosion of privacy rights as a product of things like the Patriot Act, because the internet was developing very quickly and the government couldn't keep up. And I see this project, there's potential, I think, in this project that MatPat is doing by, you know, having like a creators caucus in Congress, like an interest group that lobbies on behalf of creators that work online, be it on YouTube or elsewhere. I see that as potentially an opportunity to potentially, like, standardize and regularize certain elements of online labor, and also to update various constitutional protections of people's rights to be compatible with the digital age, or rather, to make the digital age more compatible with human rights. You know? It was almost as goofy as the idea of, hey, Germany will have this program that will help the Jews. I don't think it's that goofy. I think MatPat was taking a shot in the dark, but if he could see where he was going, it's a good idea. You know? That's what I think anyways. Right? Like, YouTube is a blighted landscape where you get, like, copyright stricken for all sorts of shit. You get drowned out by the algorithm prioritizing AI content. I don't mean his idea was stupid. I mean the people he was trying to convince. Yeah, in that sense, I think the idea was doomed to fail. At least this time. That's what I meant when I said that, like, if this is going to be successful, which it still can be, MatPat has to learn that politics is full of failure and false starts, and to basically just try to adapt to the ways in which a creators caucus would inevitably fail this time. You know. Because Congress is, you know, as well as being full of old people who are very internet illiterate, it is also full of the interests of the military-industrial complex, who are more internet literate, but have a vested interest in not seeing a lot of this through to completion, in seeing those rights actually deteriorate over time because of, like, I don't know, targeted advertising, which funnels money into their affiliated companies, etc., etc. I think you know, if you are deep into politics enough to care about this, you probably get the idea. But if you just care about, like, whether MatPat is successful in advocating for, you know, creator rights and protections in a similar way that a union might, then I think we should encourage him to keep at it, and failure is a normal part of politics. Don't let that discourage you. Simply pay attention to it and try to adapt to the inevitably very large coalition of interests that will be hostile to you. Because it's tempting in a moment like this, especially with the bipartisan tone that MatPat tried to strike, it's tempting to try to make friends with those political interests that were previously your enemies. But that's something that I would caution people not to be fooled by, because there are some political interests that are just fundamentally incompatible with other political interests. If your political interest is a campaign for digital rights in the 21st century, that is fundamentally incompatible with most other large groups of interests in the government right now. In any government, really. You know? I think the future will teach him that lesson if he likes to learn or not. Maybe. It's entirely possible. Like, some people have just not learned any lesson even remotely like that. You know how they say that, like, a cynic is just a frustrated idealist? The defining characteristic of turning cynical and giving up is that you haven't actually learned anything. You've just become jaded. But yeah, I think what MatPat is doing, like, the idea is good, and I want him to succeed in advocating for the rights of creators and protections for creators online, as well as just, you know, protections for users and people browsing online, because the world sorely needs that in the 21st century. But it's going to be way harder than just starting up the Creators Caucus, and obviously he knows that. You know, he's a smart guy. I give him that much credit for sure. Yeah, it's just gonna be a journey. You know, think about how hard Bernie Sanders has had to say the same thing over and over again for decades for people to start paying attention to him. And that might be what you're in for. It might not need to be what you're in for if you learn certain lessons quicker than I believe Bernie Sanders even has, but that type of shit. Yes, in fact, I wanted to talk about that. Just give me a minute to catch my breath. Right? I don't remember what it was I was supposed to do. Oh yeah, I think I'm just doing, like, random jobs on the bulletin board. Let's see, what do we got? Frosty Forest, Mount Freeze. Okay. That stuff. Great Canyon? Silent Chasm and Great Canyon. Okay, I can take that. I can take this. Cool. Wait. Oh. Here, hold on. That's back on the board there. I need to see what's in the mailbox. My character does the goofiest run of all time. Mail, Mount Steel, Silent Chasm. Okay, so there was another Silent Chasm entry. Okay. Linked moves. Okay, I'm gonna leave that one there, and I will pick up the Silent Chasm entry on the board over here. There we go. I'm not going to do that one right away. I will first go for the Great Canyon jobs. So enjoyable to watch. Yeah, I guess I could I could start on that thread now. The New York City mayoral race. Everybody cares about that, except for one of the candidates who's running in the race, funnily enough. I'll get to that when I get to that, but the debate happened recently. I wouldn't go that far, Gotron. One of his opponents was, but the other one was Curtis Sliwa. So it was the debate for the general election. So both candidates from the major political parties were on stage, as well as Andrew Cuomo, the independent candidate. So the three people up there were Andrew Cuomo, independent, Curtis Sliwa, Republican, and Zoran Mamdani, Democrat, who, by the way, has still not been endorsed by leadership in his own party. The Democratic Party is unwilling to support their own candidate because he's a scaly Muslim and a socialist or something. But they're crossing their fingers like, please lose, please lose, please lose. Yeah, they are. And some of the more centrist-aligned Democratic groups have also been like working with Andrew Cuomo. Certainly, there are various elements of the Democratic machine that have sort of bent the knee to Zoran Mamdani. Like Governor Hochul has supported him because she realizes that like she's one of those our plans are measured in centuries kind of political operatives where she doesn't actually believe in anything, but she understands that in order to maintain political power, sometimes you do have to ally with people who want good things and participate in those good things and give them what they want. Yeah, she's like a more competent business type of person. Not necessarily a business person, but like, I don't know, kind of a shifty negotiator who's very skilled at remaining in their position because they're willing to do some questionable things, but also willing to do good things. You know, to basically try to placate as many groups of interests as they can. Not necessarily like the rest of the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party leadership are unwilling to do good things, such as align with their own candidate who's running on a progressive platform trying to turn the party around, you know? That said, debate was like 2 hours long between Mamdani, Sliwa, and Cuomo, and Cuomo got dogged. Zoran Mamdani, easy winner. Andrew Cuomo, easy loser. Curtis Sliwa was John New York, old man New Yorker. And that's kind of the basic rundown I have for the debate. It was great television. You know, politics is super dumb, But when it's entertaining, it is so entertaining. Zoran Mamdani was just on his shit. He had like, it seemed like he had the most complete vision in an affirmative sense for what he wanted New York to be. That is basically like a working class paradise to represent America, where it is like the city. Yeah, in fact, the only thing that I would say was a disappointment about that debate was that they didn't let Curtis Sliwa wear his iconic red beret. You might not even know the name Curtis Sliwa, but here, let me look him up. You might recognize a picture of him, especially if you're American. You'll probably recognize. Here, let me open this guy right here. This is Curtis Sliwa. He's run in like, yeah, so this is him. He always wears this red beret, but they didn't let him wear it to the debate, unfortunately. He's the basically token Republican of city politics in New York. New York, being the biggest city in America and being a city, is very dominated by the left, which means the Democratic Party in the United States, to the extent that the Democratic Party ever capitulates to the left. So the Republican Party has always played a pretty marginal, but sometimes significant role. And he has been the face of the New York Republicans, and probably the most prominent and powerful New York Republican as far as local power within the city itself for decades. Ever since he was like the founder and head of the Guardian Angels, which was like a right-wing militant group in the 80s, he's done some very bad things, you know, roughing up migrants and minorities and whatever, literally like street level violence this guy is guilty of. But he's also done some good things and advocated for some good things. He, at the debate, advocated for the conversion of empty office space into affordable housing as the sort of easiest solution, one of the easiest solutions to the housing crisis. Make affordable housing out of existing space that isn't being used for anything. And he is pro-LGBT. He actually got in hot water with the rest of the Republicans for hosting a like queer pride event, you know, like being at a queer pride event and all that. And he embodies a lot of the conservative character of New York City in a very charming way. He clearly cares about New York. You can accuse him of a lot of things. Not caring about New York is not one of them. And that's why I bring this up, because the third person on that debate stage, you had Zoran Mamdani, you had Curtis Sliwa, then you had Andrew Cuomo, who does not give a single shit about New York City or about why he was there, except for to cut a check to and from his donors. And Curtis Sliwa and Zoran Mamdani were letting him know that the whole night, which was music to my ears. It was chef's kiss. You know, seriously, people have been memeing about this since the debate, but like it was like you had Curtis Sliwa and Zoran Mamdani actually relatively cordially addressing each other, like, oh, well, my opponent believes this and that he's mistaken, that would be dangerous, or something like that. The typical kind of political speak where you're not constantly saying your opponent is a terrorist who needs to be locked up and we need to like arrest all their supporters or something, you know? And then whenever Andrew Cuomo started talking, they would not interject because it was a structured debate, but it would always afterwards, it would be like, well, if it isn't Andrew Cuomo slapping fannies and killing grannies, real quote from Curtis Sliwa, by the way, you know, oh, so now the sex pest has opinions on how you want to run New York, huh? The city with a lot of women and minorities, guy who hates minorities, killed a bunch of old people, and harassed women in his office. And then, like, god damn. I was so refreshed by the absolute lack of respect that both Sliwa and Mamdani had for Andrew Cuomo on that stage. Because Andrew Cuomo, yeah, he was the butt of the joke because it was so clear he's there to cash a check. Andrew Cuomo is, the older guard of grifters. Nowadays you have social media influencers and all that. Cuomo was like the 20th century version of today's like vacuous TikTok influencer or podcaster bros. He has political connections. His father was the governor of New York, Mario Cuomo. And he is just trying to coast through his political career on his family's name and his existing social connections, and doesn't really give two shits about politics. I do like the fact they brought up he was a sore loser. Oh my god, yes. At one point, Andrew Cuomo, not even joking, tried to say that he was the Democrat, and had to acknowledge, even though Zohran Mamdani is the Democratic nominee and Andrew Cuomo was running as an independent, fell completely flat, and both of them at various points reminded, both Sliwa and Mamdani reminded him that you lost the primary. Like, you're a loser. It was so good. It was so good. This is what it feels like to be a professional hater. It feels great. The other guy, yeah, Sliwa. Yeah, Sliwa was like, "What the fuck is this independent doing here, huh? This is between the Republicans and the Democrats. We don't need no third wheel." I think somebody actually said Andrew Cuomo was fucking third wheeling the debate, which is so true. Here, let's there you go. Longshore will join the team. And I think for most people, we can either rest assured or at least comfortably predict, regardless of your feelings on the matter. I know that, if you're evil, you don't support Mamdani, but that's fine. After this debate, for sure, especially with what polling data shows, we can comfortably predict, basically everybody could comfortably predict at this point, that Zohran Mamdani is going to be the next mayor of New York City. Come November, once the general election happens. I think he gets sworn in the following year. That's typically how it happens in America. But I'm going to come at this with a maybe unexpected bit of framing. There's one takeaway I have from the debate that I think might be a little unexpected. I think Curtis Sliwa should have a role in Mamdani's vision of what New York City is going to be. Because it's clear that there's some agreement, not much, but enough for Curtis Sliwa to, ironically enough, qualify as some flavor of social democrat, which was surprising to me. There's some grounds for agreement that I think would be incredibly useful for both Curtis Sliwa and Zohran Mamdani as part of a virtuous race to the top. Like I said, with the affordable housing and stuff like that. That being a big one, as well as the enhanced state protection. This was incredibly surprising. I did not expect this. Curtis Sliwa was pro prostitute rights. He did not support, decriminalizing or legalizing prostitution, but what he did advocate for, that again, this would be a great nexus of agreement, is to pursue people responsible for constructing human trafficking networks while not pressing any sort of charges or legal action against the women who are prostitutes on the street corner and who are merely a part of that network, right? And in fact, he was also very progressive on the issue of domestic abuse, trying to beef up social resources for protecting women, particularly from abuse in the household and that sort of thing. Yeah, baby steps. But those are two big issues. Those are two important things And again, it's part of what makes it clear that Curtis Sliwa clearly cares about the fate of New York City. And I think that could be very useful to progressives and especially, like Zoran Mamdani, to say like, hey, I think we both want this. Let's work on that. We can take some photos as we're doing it. We look good for the cameras. Domestic abuse gets addressed in the city. Everybody wins. And that sort of thing. So it was a really nice debate to see, because it was like there's two people that care about New York, one of whom is clearly going to be the mayor, and there's one guy that's just kind of phoning it in. Longshore. Okay. But also, it was just damn good television. And I think that, like, with every appearance he makes on screen, Mamdani endears himself to more people. And I think that's paradoxically because he's willing to make enemies. The news anchors that were facilitating the debate were very, very adamant on asking Zoran Mamdani about two things. Number one, how he's going to capitulate to the rich, and number two, how he's going to capitulate to Israel. And he refused to give meaningful ground on either of those. How do you think Republicans are going to react once he gets into office? They're going to shit themselves. You condemn Hamas. Me? No. Hamas never did anything bad to me, so... But yeah. It was a good debate. That was basically the question he was given. Yeah. They again, it was like, they tried to give him the, like, all right, it's time for the humiliation ritual. Also, that was unfortunate. I'm so sorry, Longshore. But he just didn't really... He's like, damn, that's crazy. Light work, no reaction. And they were like, okay, I guess we gotta move on. Because at this point, Zoran Mamdani is such a big name in politics. He's one of the most popular progressive politicians in the country, which is insane, given that he was polling at 1% support in January. Nobody knew who he was. My first exposure to him was the video where he was on the beach in freezing-ass January New York weather and dove into the ocean and said, "It's freezing," which is exactly what I'm gonna do to your rent when I'm the mayor. You know? The man has aura. Yeah, the news, it was actually crazy. This is what, like, being a charismatic politician who actually believes in stuff. This is one of the most important things, that you actually believe in stuff, because that can help create a magnetic personality. His personality and his platform is so magnetic and captivating. He's offering such a compelling narrative that even the fucking bought and paid for, in bed with the military-industrial complex news anchors had to admit, this is not actually related to being mayor of New York City, right? This is New York, and you're not gonna be the president. Anyways, do you condemn Hamas? You know? I would say that I would recommend you watch the debate for yourself. And that's actually exactly what I'm going to say. Legitimately, I think there's a lot that I can't really remember, like, so clearly about the debate, and, like, I've kind of exhausted the depth and the breadth of my thoughts on the matter. Legitimately, Go watch the debate. Normally political debates like that between Crystal Ball and and fucking Tommy Lauren, or like Vosh versus Charlie Kirk back in the day, rest in piss bozo. Like, normally debates like that can be kind of painful to listen to. But goddamn, this debate is not painful to listen to in the slightest. It is a joy. Again, I will say, it is some damn good television. Go watch it. It's good. If you have it, like, it's about the length of a feature film, maybe a little bit longer. 2.5 hours. Seriously, if you have the time to like watch a movie or something, just put on that debate and watch it. It is so good. But if you've already watched the debate, then I'm preaching to the choir, because like you guys will already know what I'm talking about. Where are the missions? Mystery floor, 8th floor, 12th floor. Okay. I've been sleeping on this soundtrack, by the way. I grew up with Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 2, and undoubtedly the story's way the fuck better with that game. And it also has a banger soundtrack, so I'm kind of spoiled for choice. But this music is very nice. Thank you, Mudkip. We talked about the frog suit yet? No, I have not. I was gonna talk about ice as a thing. I can mention that in talking about the protests against ice. Many people in many places have been protesting against ICE and the ICE crackdowns on random fucking people. Wherever they are. Mostly in Chicago's where we've heard about this, but we've also heard about it in Oregon, particularly Portland. A favorite punching bag of the right, again, because like one storefront got lit on fire 5 years ago, and they have shit their pants about it ever since, on the right. So that was one of the cities where the propaganda machine attempted to get churning, and where the government sent ICE agents to try to like rough up a bunch of people for who the fuck knows what reason, right? And what happened was the government has been trying to construct this narrative that, oh my god, these are all violent Antifa operatives and they're attacking these poor ICE agents who are just trying to, kidnap people off the streets, right? The problem is that kind of falls flat when the video that is associated with the protest in Portland has a bunch of people dressed as like a frog, a twerking Among Us, and like a dinosaur. Have you seen? Okay. Let me see the, yeah. The protests were a bunch of people dressed like this. Here, hold on. Let me, in fact, Portland protests, images. Yeah, this is the fucking... This is what was going on in Portland. Violent Antifa operatives. Frog, as you can see. Yeah. Protests. Violent threats to ICE agents by the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and Cartman in the back. Okay, Cartman is actually a menace to society, but you get the idea. Dressed up as an inflatable frog guy. They're clearly like dancing and stuff. Yeah. Maybe this should be our strategy from now on. Yeah, it's actually like a pretty good strategy for protesting. Just dress as the fucking giant inflatable dinosaur or the frog or whatever, and just go like twerk in the streets in front of ICE agents, and they'll shit themselves anyway because they're massive cowards. And then they'll try to post about it, and then it's like it's literally like the meme where it's the two kids in a corner cowering, and there's just a little fluffy black rabbit. Like, you guys are like, the ICE agents are literally you know, getting piss scared over a fucking Among Us twerking to, I don't know, fucking some kind of dumbass penis music or something. In fact, it lends an air of like positivity and fun to protests, like anti-fascist protests and stuff. It makes people want to go out and protest. Like, oh, dude, it's like a block party. It's like you go out and there's the guy dressed as a giant inflatable animal. Everybody's dancing and like it's pretty chill. And there's just a bunch of like Gestapo agents there just kind of looking at you and being like, oh, the scary, violent Antifa. And you just go up and twerk at them. And they like, I don't know. At that point, maybe they would, you know, flex cuff you, pepper spray you, and yell stop resisting. So maybe don't do that. But like, you get the idea. Your story's how they've tried to pepper spray the suit? No, but that is incredibly funny. That they tried to pepper spray the guy through the suit. The dumbest fucks on planet Earth. I did see, though, that ICE pepper sprayed themselves. They like pepper sprayed into the wind, and it just came right back and like hit them. Everything is aligning to make the administration look dumb and stupid and fucking incompetent, and you know, every like pathetic thing in the book. Regular attacks never miss. What other skills do I have? Better at dodging. Those are pretty important. Non-sleeper item master? I don't need item master. I can just have sure hit attacker. Wait. I can't have both of these? Huh. So I can either have quick dodger or sure hit attacker. Oh well. Whatever. So, you know what's funny is, you know, sometimes in streaming there's the meme. Just to recap a little bit, in streaming sometimes there's the whole meme that like, damn, everything happens when I take a break from streaming. For me, it was like, I took a break from streaming, and that's when good news started to happen. Like, I stopped streaming, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, the protests are gaining momentum. They're gaining, notoriety, positive notoriety in the public image. You know, the guys dressed as the stuffed animals or as the inflatable animals and stuff. The debate happened, which was absolute cinema. You know? And speaking of ice, one of the things that's been happening, another bit of good news that has been happening since since the time that I wasn't streaming, an ICE agent actually got arrested for DUI, or sometimes it's known as DWI, driving under the influence, or alternatively driving while intoxicated, drunk driving. During the day, was arrested by Chicago PD with his kids in the car. Day drinking, drunk driving, with his kids in the car, and was like trying to tell off the cops about how, like, let me talk to your supervisor and stuff. Which again it's good news because, number one, cathartic, like this fucking pig piece of shit Gestapo agent gets arrested for being a piece of shit, doing something that is, you know, associated with being a piece of shit, having blatant disregard for the lives of his own kids. But then also, this actually hastens a potential legal confrontation between ICE and the city. You know? It it advances the dialectic where this sort of like local political power can begin to be asserted over federal political power, when like the federal political power in question is, we are going to do Hitler things and kidnap children, another thing that ICE has been doing in Chicago, and like assault women, another thing that ICE has been doing. Shout outs to Kat Abu-Ghazaleh, running for Congress in Illinois. Short queen behavior. She was out there protesting and was assaulted by ICE officers. You know? And like that power structure is very quickly coming into sharper and sharper contrast and conflict with local power. Like the Chicago PD, as much as, you know, we do not like cops, it's important because they're so embedded into state power that, you know, it is a good thing when they are now on the side of the protesters, if only because they are anti-ICE, you know? And ICE, like, flagrantly disregarding any sort of local protocol, procedure, or law is not going to get them on the cops' good side. I did see that video, yes. I didn't really care about it. I mean, insofar as it's indicative of anything, it's stuff I've mostly talked about before, that, like, Trump supporters don't actually care about anything. They're just in search of an emotionally satisfying and cathartic narrative, which means, you know, leaning into the dictatorial, tyrannical power of Trump and his government. And like, oh, Trump himself posted it. Either way, I think it's the same deal, that this government is like straightforwardly just trying to appeal to that. None of them believe anything. Trump just wants to be the big president, deal making boy, or whatever. You know, cringe ass AI generated government. Yeah. I have to cool it on my move usages, I think. New York feels like the center of the plot. Yeah, I mean, New York is like the main character of America, right? It's the biggest city. Although I should mention that there are other cities where they're like progressives running for local office. I feel like there's like we're kind of going through a resurgence in local politics. Local politics really died for a long time. But now it's like making a comeback, and New York being the biggest city, the biggest area where you could have local politics is probably going to be the most visible example of that. Yeah. I hope this is the floor where I have to find that item. I would hate to have just missed it. Let's see here. What was I gonna talk about? Oh, yeah. Oops. But now I want to talk about, like, why do you, when you fall asleep, face the opposite direction from you? Since this game uses sprites, when Pokemon are in their sleeping animation, they can only face one way. So that's the direction that Houndoom always falls asleep in. I already have a TM for taunt. See, watch, I'll do it again. Yeah, so the sprite of Houndoom sleeping just has them facing that way. In the game, you can see when he woke up, he turned back towards me, because in the game, it's still like, okay, you're facing this way, but it just uses the same sprite regardless for when you're asleep. I need a max elixir. I wanted to talk a little bit about honestly the one thing that was like actually on my mind today was the No Kings protests, because now that there's like been a mass protest movement that involves a lot of mainstream liberals, there's been discourse kicked up about it with you know, some socialists online being like, these protests aren't going to accomplish anything. A claim that there is some credence to, but they, like, basically it just involves a rhetorical pissing contest, like, that kind of unfolds between the left and liberals whenever one group has a protest and the other is just quick to discredit it. I am doing the both sides bit here. Nonetheless, the No Kings protest happened. You'll recall, actually, one of my major critiques of the No Kings protest the first time is that it wasn't clear that there was going to be any follow-up, and there was a follow-up. So credit to the organizers, one of whom was actually a small bit player socialist party in America. Yeah, okay, I can't actually do that mission because I don't have the item. The first time they did the No Kings protest, they said, like, oh, we're gonna do another one. And I was concerned that that one wasn't gonna be as big, but it actually was. It was about as big as the first time. So very cool. But with those successes come other failures, right? The biggest success of the No Kings protest this time around was, without a doubt, similar to last time, the turnout. It was an overwhelming show of public disapproval of the Trump administration, of ICE, of the actions of the federal government, right? And it also, ethnically speaking, a very wide range of people represented. So there were some demographic successes as well. Clearly, the enthusiasm for opposing the Trump administration and opposing a fascist state has not deteriorated. And another major success, I think the last major success that I want to give to it, is that there are a number of elected officials in various levels of government who have seen fit to associate themselves with the No Kings protest. It is a wide-ranging movement that enjoys some support in the halls of power, right? And then obviously it's overwhelmingly peaceful, but that's just a characteristic of protests, especially on the left. It's so not noteworthy that the demonstrations were overwhelmingly peaceful and basically no violent incidents happened that I don't even feel worth mentioning it as one of the upsides. That's just, you take that for granted. Now I get to some of the failures, which are related to the successes that I just mentioned. Let me start, in fact, with the relationship that this protest has to the halls of power. Which is that, a number of politicians are, flying the No Kings banner, making clear, hey, we share at least some version of the sentiment being expressed on the streets here. In order for that to be actionable, in order for you to capitalize... There's a banner for it. I mean banner proverbially. But yes, there is also, like, it's the crown with the X through it. A number of politicians have been sporting that, have been saying, I went to the No Kings rally today, it was cool. The first failure I want to talk about is a failure to capitalize on the relationship that the protest movement clearly has with a number of politicians and a number of levels of government, because there's no demands being made. One of the key parts of a protest movement, even a very, very wide and popular protest movement, is there has to be an overarching goal. You have to be building towards something. Otherwise, you know what you get? You get Occupy Wall Street. And nobody remembers what Occupy Wall Street was about because nobody at the time knew what it was about either. People were just upset about the response to the 2008 financial crisis and the dominance that Wall Street had over the American economy and over American government. But that was about where the sentiment ended. Like, there was nothing they weren't pointing in a direction. You know, they weren't pointing towards anything. It was very decentralized and disorganized, in fact. And that is a similar failing of the No Kings protest this time around. There was no credible, like, mass demand being made. Think of, to contrast, think of the Vietnam War era protests. A protest movement that in many ways was also a failure, but did not suffer from this particular failure. Similar thing with the pro-Palestine protests that have had an effect on messaging, even though it hasn't necessarily been borne out in policy yet, because they had very clear demands, even if they were very basic. Vietnam War era protests, pull out of Vietnam. The pro-Palestine protests, stop supporting Israel, ceasefire in Gaza, stop the genocide, right? That was like the vibe. You could infer a demand based on the vibe. No Kings, you can't do that. No Kings is definitely more a part of the Occupy Wall Street brand of protesting, and there is no real coherent set of demands being expressed. There's no affirmative political aspiration being expressed. You know, there's only a negative desire to escape oppression that currently exists. You know, no kings. And that even ties into another failure of messaging, which is without having done anything, politicians in the halls of power have tried to capitalize on the protests, have tried to capitalize on the popularity of the protests. We've seen internationally, they actually changed the name. The Democrats changed the name of No Kings to No Tyrants to make it compatible with countries that have kings. Which I feel like is kind of exemplary of some of the problems that the No Kings movement faces, right? Like, if you could take No Kings and morph that into a comprehensive, if very baseline, demand for a representative, democratic form of government based on suffrage, voting, and that sort of thing. A message that's still relevant in the year 2025, not only because there are still monarchies in the world, but also because there's anti-democratic backsliding. It would be basically a call to restore democracy. Because of this rebranding that was in part acquiesced to by the organizers, No Kings can't even call itself a rejection of monarchy. It can't call itself a rejection of monarchism or even tyranny. Because they changed the slogan to No Tyrants for the countries where there are kings. You know? That is a critical, I think, damning failure of this movement. Is that, you know, for all the things that it's against, it can't express anything that it is for. Not even democracy. Because if you're willing to put up with a monarch that is anti-democratic, you can't say that your protest is pro-democracy if you're willing to say, okay, well, we're okay with kings, we just don't want a bad king. No. You just, at that point, you don't have a message. You don't have a movement. You have Occupy Wall Street. You know? I hate liberals. I do too. Sometimes. But that brings me then to a demographic failing of this protest, of the No Kings protest. I mentioned that a wide range of ethnicities were represented, you know, wide range of identities, straight, queer, you know, white, black, brown, etc., men and women, and that's true. You may notice that I excluded age from that demographic. That is another one of the failings of this protest. Partially, I think, as an emergent property of it also, like, not making any coherent demands and not really contributing to an affirmative narrative to build towards. Young people didn't turn out as much to this protest. The overwhelming demographic representation was older women at this protest, you know? Here, hold on. Let me see if I can find what I'm thinking of. No Kings protest demographics. Age, okay. Young people were severely underrepresented at the No Kings protest. And the most represented groups were, I think, older millennials, Generation X, and what was left of the baby boomers. That was the predominant age group, middle-aged and older. Those were the people turning out for the No Kings protests, you know? The young people couldn't be bothered to care. Is that because the kids are cooked? Partially, yes. I'm not going to mince words there. But I think a lot of that is also attributable to the failure of the protest itself, to a failure on the part of the organizers, and a failure that was contributed to by politicians by gutting the movement of any potential messaging it could have other than "we don't like Trump." You haven't done anything to really endear yourself to make headway with a younger demographic of people. Young people are alienated, and they don't just want to be free from tyranny. They want something to become of society. And if incels are of any indication, people oftentimes don't really know what they want society to turn into, but they want their life to be better. And you have to give them something there. You have to give them something in the affirmative. This is why Zoran Mamdani's campaign has been so successful, is because he constantly refers to things that he's going to do in the affirmative. You know? Same thing with Black Lives Matter. Somebody was pointing this out, that young people did turn out for things like the Black Lives Matter movement, for the pro-Palestine protests. I mean, for Christ's sake, just in the past couple of years, the pro-Palestine protests were overwhelmingly dominated by young people, college kids. Hell, the protests started and took place in large part on college campuses. It was a defining issue of our time, and young people turned out for it because it was compelling, there was a narrative, and there were affirmative demands. Even if it was just that vibe-based demand that I mentioned, the vibe was there to infer a set of demands, a consistent set of demands. You could ask two completely different people on opposite sides of the country, what were the pro-Palestine protests about, and they would be able to tell you basically the political aspiration of the protest. You can't do that with No Kings. You know, it's saying what it's against. It's not saying anything that it's for, because it isn't for anything. You know, even with a protest that is against a government, you have to be for something. You know, otherwise your protest is doomed to fail, because it's like, don't get me wrong. The protest having happened, even with all the failures baked in, is better than it not having happened. You know, that's not what I want to I don't want to take away from that, right? Just by gathering all of this mass discontent for the administration, for the government, that contributes to the weakening of the government, that contributes to the slowing down of authoritarianism in this country. It makes it way more difficult for the government to continue with these crackdowns, because authoritarian governments, more than any other kind of government, depend on public approval. You know, it is their bread and butter, the public approval. And when you deprive them of that, that hurts them. So this protest did help, but it was also kind of a failure. You know? At most, what you could read into this protest was it was an advocate, like a call to like return to the norm, basically, the way things were before Trump, which again is not a affirmative demand. It is a negative demand. You know? Get rid of those jobs on the bulletin board. It was literally like Make America Great Again. Yeah, it was like Make America Great Again, but like left, like mildly more left-leaning version. Rewind time to before Donald Trump was elected or something, you know? And it did numbers, but it's not going to pan out in the long term, especially because unless something changes, of course. It's been going for there was the No Kings protests in June. There were the No Kings protests just like half a week ago or more recently. In fact, I think they're still happening. There's an opportunity to do a third mobilization in the future, to start scheduling for another one and to correct for some of these flaws. But if you don't do that, then this movement isn't going to amount to anything affirmative. It could contribute to something that does amount to something affirmative. But, you know, I don't know. All I'm saying here, all I'm trying to say is that it should have been done a little bit better. Right? And like, wow, you know, armchair critique, right? Even if you change, there's just one critical thing that I would have wanted to change. If I could change any one critical thing, don't capitulate to naming your movement No Tyrants instead of No Kings, because we're not okay with kings. Even if they're not tyrannical rulers, we don't like kings. We like democracy. We like getting to elect the people that represent us and that would be accountable to us, that we can decide to unelect, pull out of office, and put somebody else in there that will do what we want. That's why it's called No Kings. It is the name itself champions, at least in part, it can lend itself very easily to championing a democratic Republican form of government, which is not what I would want as a socialist, but it is a good affirmative vision for liberalism. You know, many early liberals and socialists were pro-republicanism, as in elected forms of government, elected representatives that were accountable to the people that voted for them, that were subject to the political interests directly of their communities, you know, and weren't just appointed for life. You know, but the movement has undercut itself in that way by saying, well, no, we're okay with the good kings. I'm not. America's not. You shouldn't be. You shouldn't be okay with having a good king. You shouldn't be okay with having a king. You know? But that's the biggest problem. And I think if you correct for that, if you like, again, it can potentially, I know for some political operatives, they could think, well, changing our message back and forth could read as us being uncertain. You cannot, trust me, you cannot come off as any more waffly as you already are. But it will be perfectly possible and feasible to come back from the perception of waffling if you decide, you know what, no, the rebrand to No Tyrants was a bad idea. We actually just oppose monarchy in all its forms. We do not like unelected rulers. If that's your message, then great. Commit to that. Commit to that as an affirmative, and that will have influence on the public discourse in America. The increasing undemocratic nature of what are supposed to be elected offices in the federal government. Again, a very liberal-brained affirmative position, but an affirmative position nonetheless, that the president shouldn't have unchecked, unlimited, unelected power. That's what the movement needs to do, I think. But the fact that it drew such large crowds, big success, you know? Next time, look, if it does this, you could draw an even bigger crowd. If you incorporate, again, because of how broad it is, I don't know how feasible it is to, like, and it's not really possible to do this from the top down, but like try to coalition build with some of the populist elements of the left to offer something affirmative to younger people. It could be a generational protest movement, you know? But right now it isn't. Right now it's like, if people remember the Women's March, you know, Occupy Wall Street, the Women's March, those did about as much for the discourse as No Kings seems poised to. You know, with how easily they were dissipated and co-opted after the fact, you know, they mattered at the time, and the political consequences of them kind of reverberate. But it's hard to point to how, because of how non-specific the protests were. Yeah. I feel like I've just said the same thing over and over again. That's my thoughts on the No Kings protests. You know, and protest is good and based, and people should do it. What was the other one? There was a Silent Chasm job posting in here, right? Yes. Give me a minute. You heard what happened to TwitchCon? What happened to TwitchCon? I did not hear about that. Well, you figure it out on your own. All right, I'll look into it later. I was like, I'm thinking about probably ending the stream right after I get my team together. So, sorry, the stream was kind of uneventful, but nonetheless, I will visit Ingalls. Ah, Wild Plains. That's what's up. Alright. Hopefully you won't get murked again, Longshore. I'll bring a few Reviver seeds this time. I'll bring one at least. We save the game. Save and continue. Thank you. Good. Good, good. Streaming today has been like more tiring than usual because I'm trying to voice train still, and that's hard. And also it was a very dense hour of me talking about stuff, so I'll see you guys next time. Let me see who else is live. Sorry I wasn't live for that long, but, you know, it is what it is. You were gone for a while? Yeah, I mean, that's part of, like, house showings and stuff, basically. Open houses and whatnot. I mean, I'm moving soon, so. Hassan's talking about the No Kings protests. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention that like the government shutdown is still going. Like I didn't even get to that because uh but yes, nonetheless, the government shutdown is still going. Um Republicans are kind of sweating. Democrats are holding firm a lot longer than I thought they would. They may have already outlasted some of my estimates for when they were going to cave and uh, uh, get on board with like a budget bill to open up the government again. But enjoy the Hasanabi broadcast. Voice training is hard. All right, bye.